Joining me in studio right now is Heather Harris from Harris & Harris, taking a look at some of the pending legislation that would compromise your right to a trial by jury, even pending to the point where it's, in one case, where it's passed both houses and sitting on the governor's desk. We'll talk about all that and more. Thank you for coming in. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Alan. I appreciate being here.
Okay, let's talk about some of these issues. And again, most of these are pending. They have not passed yet. But you're concerned about some of them. I want to find out why. And I want to find out how they're going to inhibit us and to defend ourselves and have full protection. 292 limits our ability to seek legal recourse if a family member or any one of us is the victim of unsafe medical practices. How so?
Well, the problem here is that it's once again an attempt to try to limit access to the courts by individuals, as we saw with the medical malpractice reforms, quote unquote, that passed several years ago. The promise had been, as greatly advertised by the insurance companies, that the doctors would stay in Nevada and that costs would go down and that everyone would be healthier and happier and safer. And as you see with things like the endoscopy clinic that conducted horribly horrific medical practices, that people were harmed in a real way and intentionally so. And I don't think that these laws are particularly making us any safer. I think what it is it's limiting our access to courts.
What would a 292 do specifically that would not help us but hurt us?
Well, specifically, it keeps us from being able to access courts when something happens to us.
What would we do if something happened to us, wound up in a situation like that endoscopy problem that occurred?
Well, not only are you limited in being able to access the courts, you're not going to be able to find a lawyer who will represent you.
Why?
It becomes there are too many hurdles in the way. It becomes so expensive that lawyers are not able to represent their clients adequately. They have to go through so many different scenarios that most lawyers in these cases, as you know, take these cases on contingency fee. That means that they don't get paid anything unless they win. Not only do they not get paid anything, but they are spending all of their own money to basically further these cases. If you put up more and more roadblocks to be able to further these cases, make it more and more expensive, the risk goes up. Most lawyers, despite what people think, are not that wealthy. They're not going to be able to fight these fights, and it limits the ability of common individuals to be able to access the courts.
Give me a roadblock, though, that is built into SB 292 that would prohibit a lawyer from going after them.
Basically, it's just limiting that trial by jury.
Goes back to that again, because you and I talked about this. So the issue is trial by jury. You could not have a trial by jury. And that was one of the concerns you had with SB 291, just before 292.
That's correct.
Which, tell me about that.
Well, SB 291 basically is, once again, a scenario where you have people that have been injured by somebody else. It is not their fault, but they are not going to be made whole. It's trying to...
You get into a car accident.
Yes, you get into a car accident. You have somebody who rear-ends you because they're texting or they're drunk or they're doing whatever, and you're just, taking your kid to soccer practice. They rear-end you, they harm you, yet you are not going to be made whole. The only thing, if you have health insurance, for example, the only thing that you're going to be able to recover is what was paid by your health insurance company to the medical providers.
You won't be able to sue the people who hit you?
You can sue them, but you're not going to be made whole. There are many things that...
What do you mean made whole? I mean, I'm not sure what that means.
What it means is that if you and I are responsible people, we pay for health insurance. We have a lot of our own out-of-pocket expenses that we pay for health insurance. If we get hit by a drunk driver, then that drunk driver isn't going to be responsible for the time that you missed work, your pain and suffering, all of the things that can happen to you. You can lose your job and have no income forever and have medical expenses for a very long time.
But you can sue that drunk driver,
You can sue them, but you're not going to recover for any of those things. All you're going to get is, well, the insurance company negotiated a reduced rate with the hospital, so we'll give you that. But it doesn't really corroborate, it doesn't really correspond with what your harm has been.
What about the right to using a jury for 291? Will you be able to use a jury or not?
You can use a jury, but the problem is that you're stripping down the right to a jury trial because you are limiting what a jury can do. You're telling the jury you can give an award, but you can only give this much, and it has to be within these parameters. And you're basically, if you take a box of the right to a jury power, this is the 7th Amendment of the Constitution. It's something that our founding fathers found to be extremely important, so much so that they included it on almost every conversation and topic and speech pre-Revolutionary War. It was something that important to them. You're taking this broad right of the jury to be able to make a decision on their own. You put these people together and they can make a decision, and you're just chipping away at what they can actually decide. You're taking away the ability of a jury to make an independent decision by narrowing the parameters of what their decision can be.
We'll talk about in a moment why some of this is coming about. Okay. We'll get your calls as well at 257-5396 and 702-257-KDWN. Call or text. Joining me in studio right now from Harris & Harris is Heather Harris, and I appreciate your being here today.
Thank you, Alan. Good morning.
So let's talk a little bit about, real quickly, SB 291 would limit your right to a trial by jury in the case of a traffic accident. And the reason, and it would limit how much you can actually get from a decision.
That's correct.
All right. And you told me, you said off air also, you said that most doctors support this.
Most doctors are opposed to this bill.
They're opposed to the bill,
right,
because it would limit it. They would like to have people get what they want to get.
Well, it's not only that. There are many doctors that provide services on what's called a medical lien. Mm-hmm. So not only are the lawyers who are representing these people that are legitimately hurt, but the doctors who aren't getting paid, up front, they're forwarding their own money. The doctors are also making those same agreements. They're saying, okay, we recognize that you're hurt. We recognize you're legitimately hurt. You're in pain. You're suffering. You need help. But these people probably can't get the medical care that they need unless the doctor says, okay, I'll agree to take my fee later on. Could be years from now when your case is resolved. I'm not going to be getting a penny before then. Everyone involved signs an agreement and they say, okay, we, as the lawyers, promise that we're going to pay them out of the eventual recovery. And the problem is, if you have a law that says you're only going to be reimbursed what a health insurance company would negotiate, which is, as we know, pennies on the dollar of what real healthcare is costing in America today, you're not going to have doctors that are going to step up, because one of the reasons that they're going to do that is they're agreeing to take this big risk that they may not get paid at all as well.
Isn't the reason that some of this legislation comes about in reaction to decisions that have come about in the past, like the hot coffee? The old woman with the old coffee from Matt McDonald's, wherever it was, where she got burned and got millions of dollars. And people said, oh, my God, I can't believe it. I mean, aren't some of these bills at least in reaction to things like that? I'm
so glad you brought that up. I really am, because there is a really interesting documentary, and I encourage you to watch it, and it's called Hot Coffee. It's available on Netflix. It basically describes not only the case where that woman, I mean, it sounds on its face like it's flimsy and lame, and how in the world could this happen? It sounds bizarre. Yeah. When you see the injury that was caused to this woman, though, I mean, it is horrific. I mean, it really is gruesome. And it was after McDonald's had been specifically warned and had been told and had made an intelligent and specific business decision to continue to create their coffee this way. The injuries to this woman were so severe. Her genitalia was basically burned beyond recognition, and she ended up eventually dying, not necessarily as a direct result of the coffee, but shortly thereafter. Well,
I don't know how she was holding the coffee. I don't know what liability she had in terms of her actions. I did go into a fast food place last week. I won't say which one, and it was not McDonald's, but it was another one, and they have a sign up there that says, we want you to know our coffee is hot. I mean, and it's hot, and if you handle it wrong, or I don't know what words they use, but it was, in effect, if you handle it wrong somehow, you could get burned, so be careful. Well, but I mean, they're still serving hot coffee at fast food places.
And coffee is intended to be hot. We understand it's a hot beverage. The difference with this particular coffee is that it was super, super, super heated. It was beyond the point of just saying, oh, it's kind of hot. I mean, this would be like, just absolutely scalding temperature that even after it's been sitting for a while is still going to be extremely hot, beyond the expectation that you would find in getting a normal cup of coffee. My point in talking about some of these facts, though, isn't I wasn't involved in this case. I don't know anything about it, particularly other than what I've seen and read. But my point is that you and I, as individuals, don't really know what the facts were in that case. We weren't in that courtroom. We didn't see all of the evidence. The jury did. That jury, being made up of men and women who are just like me and you, were the ones that came up with that award. And what's interesting is, people discuss things like runaway juries. You hear that phrase being used. What's interesting is that trial judges, where you have a bench trial, and a bench trial meaning that the judge was the only person that was making the decision, not the jury. And sometimes parties agree to do that. Generally, and there's been numerous studies about this, provide more in a verdict than a jury does. A jury trial is no little thing. You don't know what the jury is going to think. You don't know if they're going to like you or like your client. They don't know if they're going to agree that the facts were what you think the facts were. You really don't know. So the fact that that case in particular went through that entire process and that system, and this jury came up with that amount, tells me that there was something significant there, and it's not something that should be disregarded.
It might have been legitimate, and I'm not saying it was not.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is that some of these pieces of legislation that we're talking about, limiting certain payback to people who are injured on certain levels, I'm saying they might be a reaction to cases like that. Maybe not the hot coffee one in particular, but the hot coffee.
I think it is absolutely a reaction to that.
Okay.
And it's not just a reaction to the case. The reason that the case is so well known is very specific. Insurance companies used it as a benchmark of, oh my gosh, can you believe that this happened? We should never let these things happen again.
So you're putting the onus of responsibility on some of these pieces of legislation on insurance companies, saying that lawyers and doctors are in agreement about being opposed to these particular laws, and it's the insurance companies who is the odd guy out, who's the one fighting doctors and lawyers both.
Absolutely. That is absolutely true.
Right. Just wanted to be clear.
Yes.
257-5396 and 702-257 KDWN. A couple of other things we're going to look at, the other side of news, traffic, and weather. One is the rights of workers injured on the job to get medical attention and financial assistance for time off, which they say they deserve. We'll talk about that. And then protecting people for a product that is defective. Do you charge everyone down the line who is sold that product, or just certain people? How do you determine who should be able to have to pay when there's a problem product? Who? We'll come on back. Continue with Heather Harris. Your calls, 257-5396 and 702-257 KDWN. Call or text. Joining me in the studio right now is Heather Harris with Harris & Harris to discuss some of this legislation that would compromise your right to a trial by jury, and also compromise other types of rights that you might have by limiting what you might be able to sue for. And some of these things are very interesting, and I appreciate your being here this morning.
Thank you, Alan.
Some of the, I want to talk about 296. Now, Nevada State Senate SB 296, very important, would protect the sellers and manufacturers of dangerous or defective products, provided they passed some form of government oversight. Even if those businesses lied or misled government regulators, manufacturer would be allowed to totally skate if their product was approved by these type of government agencies. So say you, as talking about 296. Tell me about 296, exactly what it would do.
Well, basically what it would do in the shortest terms here, Alan, is limit people's ability to sue for a product that has harmed them. If there has been a government regulatory agency that has reviewed the product and has declared that it's okay, and I'm not entirely clear what that's going to mean yet. That is what's been proposed. I don't know exactly how they believe that this approval process would work. I don't know how they believe that increasing bureaucracy and increasing, government oversight, which has been shown to not particularly be that effective in protecting people in the past. I don't know how that government system of oversight should be able to relieve those industries from harmful products.
Well, you mentioned me earlier when we talked about this, that this had to do with who you can sue on the chain of people down the line.
Yes, that's true. Basically, as the law is now, and this is how it's been forever, if you have a product that's out in the stream of commerce,
yes,
every person who sells that product is liable to the end user who is eventually harmed by that product. Why is because each one of them knew or should have known that the product that they're selling is dangerous. Now, there are certain, cases where you can sue, the seller of the product, but ultimately it's the manufacturer who you're going after. But this basically breaks up that chain. It basically says you don't have the ability to sue somebody who maybe even knew, like, oh, well, yeah, I know that this, leaf blower is bound to explode and it's been shown to explode and people have burst into flames while they're trying to blow their leaves in their yard. But I'm going to sell it anyway because, we have this golden stamp of approval from whatever organization has approved it.
If an end user sells something, though, and they don't know that it is going to explode or whatever problem is going to occur with that product, no matter what it happens to be, and it was, let's say, it could have been inadvertent even from the manufacturer. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe they knew about it. But the retailer had no idea that this was going to occur. Why should they be held liable? I mean, I agree with not having to hold all people liable down the line if there are people who genuinely had no knowledge that there was a problem with the product.
Well, here's the thing, that promotes intentional ignorance. That promotes intentionally not being able to say, yeah, I just didn't know. Sorry about that. Our bad. Historically, and this is throughout the history of America, everyone who sells products has been strictly liable. Strict liability is a legal concept that basically says if you have it and you sell it and someone else gets hurt, you're responsible, whether you knew it or should have known or whatever. This is basically, once again, chipping away at the rights of Americans to be able to say, look, you sold it, you should have known about it. Even if you didn't, I'm not going to be burdened to try and prove that you knew about it because I ultimately was hurt. You should have made yourself aware that these products can be harmful. It's what has helped, keep less harmful products out of commerce in general.
But I don't mind, see, and here's where I disagree with you, because I don't mind going after the people who, if, let's say it was intentionally known that a leaf blower was going to blow up, that the manufacturer went, let's just keep it quiet, and they gave it to me to sell in my hardware store. And they said, yeah, it's totally okay. And it's been approved by the government and everything's fine. And it's got the stamp of approval and other people have had it, no problem. And I sell it and you get hurt using it to come after me when how would I have known? How could I have known if I'm being told and assured by the manufacturer and by all the people who've done the research and the government put their stamp of approval on it? How could I be held responsible to know something like that?
Well,
I have a million products in my hardware store. I can't go search out every single one and make sure every nail's going to do the right thing and every leaf blower's. I just can't have time to do that.
No, but the problem here is that how is the common person, who is the person that is being harmed, supposed to be able to prove what you knew or didn't know? There's already regulations that have been placed on all these products. I don't
know how they can prove it. I mean, but
they can't. That's the problem.
But then you're asking them to not have to prove it, but you're saying to me, you're going to be liable whether you knew it or not. So I have no defense to be able to escape responsibility, even though I really didn't know.
Well, as it is right now, when these types of lawsuits are filed, although the ultimate seller is technically on the chain for strict liability on these products, you have, sorry about that. You have really the manufacturer who is ultimately responsible, and that's usually where it goes. The hardware store guy gets sued. He immediately tenders it to the manufacturer and says, "Hey, I'm being sued for this. You need to cover it." And generally speaking, that is how that goes already. It's a it's a problem, quote unquote, that's being addressed with this quote unquote solution. I don't think that it really solves the problem. I think there is no problem here. I think that it's basically trying once again to restrict what a common person who has no other recourse can do when they are harmed by a defective product.
We'll come back and continue with Heather Harris in just a moment. Also, if you want to join in 257-5396 and 702-257 KDWN. Joining me in studio right now, Heather Harris with Harris & Harris, talking about some of the pending legislation up in Carson City. And I appreciate your being here. Let's talk about a couple of these here. One is a Senate Bill 142 that would repeal the requirement that motorcyclists must wear a protective helmet. A bill that comes up every session has failed to win support so far. But, people are saying it's a matter of freedom and everything else, and I should be able to do it. You like the idea? I mean, as an attorney, what do you think about something like that?
As an attorney who represents people that are injured in accidents, I think it's a terrible idea. I mean, the idea that, people perhaps without full knowledge and awareness of what can happen to your body and your brain if you're hit on a motorcycle, if you're struck on a motorcycle, may or may not be your fault. Basically, it can be a death sentence, or not necessarily a death sentence, but it can be living your life as a vegetable, living in a rehab hospital. I've seen the end result of this. I mean, personally, I think it's a terrible idea, but it's astonishing to me that people want to have the right to not wear a helmet, yet they're not concerned about losing their right to a jury.
No, I understand that. Some people say it's a matter of freedom, and they like to have the wind blow in their hair as they ride them. I mean, motorcycles are more dangerous than cars. I believe that. And the result is that you're getting yourself involved in a situation that has the potential of being more dangerous. And you know it when you get on that bike.
Well, you should know it, but there are, some people, especially if you look at, young men, for example. I don't want to over characterize this, but generally speaking, that's who's writing these things. And, you've got a lot of people down the line that do this, but you have people that are already maybe taking some risk, and they're definitely taking risk just by getting on the motorcycle.
Absolutely.
I'd prefer not to see people get horrifically injured. I'd prefer to say, okay, you know what? Yeah, you crashed your bike. You had to lay it down because somebody made a bad move. I'd rather not see their head smashed into the pavement.
All right, something else I'm going to talk about a little more tomorrow on that. It's Assembly Bill 322 from Mike Sprinkle, a Democrat from Sparks, supporting the idea that he would like to see a ban on smoking in cars with children. A good idea? Is that an infringement, and how far might this go?
I think it's an actually excellent idea. I'm completely in support of this one. I don't know what you think, Alan, but to me, children that are in a car with an adult don't have a choice as to whether or not they're going to be in the car with them. They are there, and they're innocent people. They are innocent victims. They don't get to make this choice themselves. We recognize, I think, widely that cigarette smoking is bad for you. It causes cancer. It causes a number of different diseases and illnesses that can affect you throughout your life.
I don't disagree with you in principle. Okay, I really do not. And in the sense of, or at least in theory, that parents should not be smoking in a car with kids. I think it's a stupid idea if they're doing it. A law instead of education, maybe a carrot instead of a stick. Here's my concern, because where does this go? Does this open the door to other things? How about home inspection? Somebody's in a home and they say, well, it's in different rooms. What if you're in the same room as your kid in the living room? You're all watching TV and the parents are smoking in that room. I mean, are we going to have people come to the door, knock on the door, and want to inspect at 7:30 at night to see if you're all watching TV together?
Well, I think that's taking a little far afield.
Well,
I don't know that that's even what's proposed here. I think the issue is a car by nature is a very small space. It's an enclosed space. Now, I don't believe in smoking around children at all. That's just my personal view, but I'm not going to be telling people what to do. The problem is, when you have people that smoke in a very small enclosed space with innocent children, they're subjected to it in a very specific way.
No, but I'm agreeing.
They can't
I'm agreeing
escape
with you.
it.
But
Yeah,
I'm
they
agreeing
can't
with
escape
you
it.
on that parents shouldn't do it. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a stupid idea.
But
do we
people
make
do.
but do we make a law against it? Well, people do a lot of stupid things.
Yeah.
And again, being in a small little living room in a home, that could be very, very small while you're all watching TV and parents smoking. I know that happens too. that's a stupid idea too. And you and I would agree with that. I'm sure it's a stupid idea.
I think it's a stupid idea, but I think that in my view, and I get what you're saying, but in my view, I think that's assuming a slippery slope is there where I don't think it necessarily is. I think people's homes are treated differently than
except
their
in the state of
do.
Nevada, our car is considered an extension of our home and living room, and that's why you can carry a gun in your glove compartment, because that part of the law, and you're the lawyer, you know, it states that your car is an extension of your home.
That is true.
So if you do start with the car, I think it is a slippery slope, saying now we can go to the other part of it, which is your home. That's what concerns me. Again, in theory, I agree with you. I think it's dumb and stupid for people to smoke around kids, whether it's in a home or a car or anywhere. I think it's dumb for people to smoke cigarettes anyway. That's my opinion. But if they do, it should not be around kids. But to create a law like this, I think is a slippery slope, especially when cars are considered extensions of your homes.
I understand what you're saying from a legal perspective. I think where this stems from, though, is honestly, myself, I was driving down the road actually no less than a month ago. I saw a car a car is visible. People see inside your car, unlike your home. You can see inside your car. And I saw a car where 3 women were smoking, and there was a baby in a car seat, literally right next to them, and the windows were up.
All 4 were smoking at that point. There
yes.
you go.
Yeah.
And you never know what they were smoking, I bet you either. You have no idea. Heather Harris, thank you for coming in. I appreciate it. From Harris & Harris. Take your time to join me this morning.
Alan, thank you so much. I appreciate being
Always
here.
great having you here.